Okay, so this is lecture number 20, and we started with the population topic in class number 19, right? We discussed the population pattern or the growth pattern of India. That was the major topic. In addition to that, we also discussed the population age structure of India, right? And today, first of all, the first topic that we are starting today is the age dependency. Age dependency. See, age dependency, again we will use the DTM model, demographic transition model, that we discussed yesterday in brief, although we will discuss in detail when we will take up the population theory topic. But in the age dependency also we will use the demographic transition model, that how in the different stage the age dependency is different, right? Age dependency is basically of two type. Number one is the child dependency. Child dependency, when the ratio of the population in the age group 0 to 14 is higher, that is child dependency case. The second is the age old dependency. Age old dependency, when the population in the 65 plus age group is more, then age old dependency arrives. Okay, so basically if you look in general perspective, in general if we say the developing countries have this kind of dependency, child dependency. However, in case of the developed world, they have the age old dependency basically. So we will start with the demographic transition model, that how in India age dependency varies. So if you see the demographic transition model, it look like as if that in the first stage of the demographic transition, the fertility and mortality rates are very high. But as we move on, the fertility rate and the mortality rate declines. First the mortality rate decreases, and then the fertility rate also start declining, right? So this is the second stage, this is the third stage, and this is the fourth stage. Okay, first stage of demographic transition, this is second, this is third. And we discussed yesterday that no state in India can be clubbed in a single stage of the demographic transition model. In India, different states fall in the different category. For example, Bihar and many eastern states, they still are in the second stage of demographic transition. But many states which are experiencing the demographic transition, where the adult population is higher, the working age population is higher, they are in the stage number 2. For example, Haryana, Punjab, and many Maharashtra, etc. However, many states where the demographic transition has completed, and they are in the stage number 4. For example, Kerala, right? So on that basis, the different state definitely have the different, as we say, the different age dependency. But on average, on a national scale, if we say, on that basis we are doing here, right? So on that, if you see what happens, that any country crosses any country crosses the first stage of the demographic transition, the age dependency will, particularly the child dependency or the young age dependency, will increase sharply. For example, in case of let us make a first a general diagram. So this will happens basically. And the dependency will, so already the dependency was high, when we started the demographic transition. But as the country enters in the second phase, the demographic transition increases, because at this stage the fertility increases because of the intervention, particularly the medical interventions. So because of the increase in fertility, the number of children who are surviving, they increases. So the child dependency increases at this stage, and this abnormality is seen in Indian. This is a general, but when we will make the case of India, you will see that also. Okay, but in case when we any country enters the fourth stage, the dependency again increases. I think this should be okay. Let us in the third stage, actually in the fourth stage, the dependency must increase. Okay, here when country enters in the fourth stage, because country enters, this is the old age dependency, and this is the unified diagram that we are making, old age dependency. Because okay, in countries entering in the fourth stage, and the number of older people, they increases the number of increase as compared to the number of the adult population or the young age population. This is the child dependency, okay, or the young age dependency, as it is called, young age dependency. Okay, so this is general diagram. But if in case of India, you see what happened in case of India. Initially the dependency ratio was 78%. sorry, 71%, right? And in 1966 the dependency increased to 75%. So from 71% to 75%, because the number of children who were surviving, they increased because of the medical interventions, active intervention of the government. And after that it started decreasing, right? So dependency ratio in India is continuously decreasing. But when you see the dependency ratio, child dependency I'm talking about here, this is in 2015 it is close to 43%. So this is the case of young age dependency, young age dependency for India, right? So it is decreasing now. But when you see in case of old age, when you see the old age population, the dependency for old age population is increasing. Okay, it is increasing. For example, in 1960 the old age dependency was close to 5% or 5.4% more accurately. By 2015 the old age dependency increased to 8.56%. So this is the old age dependency. But mind you, this old age dependency becomes a demographic burden. This old age dependency becomes a demographic burden only when it crosses more than 10%, only when it crosses 10% mark. For example, in developed world, okay, there are number of consequences of the dependency. Basically, for example, when age old dependency increases, the consequences for this dependency, for example, the expenditure on the social sector, expenditure on social services, that increases. Okay, for example, pension, etc. Okay, crime rate against the against old population, that increases. And it has been seen that the women generally survive longer age, for longer age as compared to the male, right? So that also reduces the feminization of aging. That all, so what is happening is feminization of aging. This is also happening. So there are number of consequences of the old age dependency. Okay, however, this old age dependency is not experienced, this demographic burden is not experienced in case of India. Okay, so because India is in this or entering in the third stage of demographic transition, okay. And in the third stage of demographic transition, any country generally experiences the demographic dividend, okay. And in this case, for example, in case of Haryana, Punjab, large or many other states, the young population is increasing, and this demographic transition in turn fuels the industrial growth of country, because they provide the skilled population, unskilled population, labor force, okay, all kind of the capital, okay, is provided by this demographic dividend. Okay, again, because of this third stage, the child dependency also reduces, okay. And this reduction in child dependency reduces the expenditure burden on the families, okay. And the third benefit of the any country entering in the third stage is the migration, okay. This stage experiences the migration to cities, okay, and in turn leading to large scale urbanization, okay, which fuels ultimately the growth, okay, economic growth. However, the negatives are also associated with it, because when countries enter in the third stage, the aspiration level of the population increases, and as the aspiration level population increases, as we said, because of aspiration, many citizens, they start migrating in the cities, because of which they jettison the rural lifestyle, and the rural areas are basically devoid of the young population. So the young or the old population, reside in the rural areas. Okay, and they suffer from all kind of problem, with whether it is the alienation, whether it is psychological distress, on the condition of the medical help, crime rate, feminization, etc. So all kind of problems they arrive in the rural areas. So this is basically the main negative effect when population start migrating to the cities. Okay, jettisoning or the agriculture activities. Okay, so this was the main concept of the aging, that how aging is processing in India, oh sorry, proceeding in India, and what are the negative effect of the country present, or country having the more than 10% age-old dependency leading to the demographic burden, and what are the negative associated with that. But when a country enters in the third stage of the demographic transition, and it is said to be, using the demographic dividend that can be further used for the industrial growth, okay, for the migration to the cities, urbanization, okay, which again fuel the economic growth. However, there are the negatives associated with that migration as well, right? And that we saw here. So this was the dependency topic. Moving on to the next topic that we will discuss is the migration. Again again in the topic of migration, first of all, what is migration? And we will do the migration again, India specific migration, right? Basically, so migration is nothing but the temporary or permanent change of the residence, that is called the migration. Okay, there are number of causes of the migration. If you see the general causes of migration, what can be the cause of a migration? Number one, it can be overpopulation. And any region having the overpopulation, population density has increased beyond the resources present. This leads to the outflow or out migration of the population. So this overpopulation becomes a push factor for the population. Then the social factors, social causes. For example, in any society where there is discrimination, for example, more discrimination in rural areas on the caste basis, then the more conscious families they start migrating towards the urban areas, because there is no list or the no discrimination on the basis of the caste, on the or religion factors. So this again is a cause. The next is the economic causes. So for for what we can say, for increasing the economic prospects of the family, then population start migrating in the urban areas. Okay, this can be another cause. Then the technology, the areas which have the more technology advancements, they migrate more rapidly. For example, the Roman areas, for example, if you see in the Roman time, the Romans they migrated and advanced in the adjoining areas of the North Africa, in the Western Asia, okay, in the Europe Peninsula, or the Iberian Peninsula, etc. They were taken over by the Roman Empire because they had the advanced technology and they proceeded ahead with the help of that. Okay, again the war, for example, wars that can be become the another reason for migration. For example, Rohingya Muslim in the Myanmar, they migrating towards the India and the Bangladesh because of the persecution happening there. Then environmental causes can also become the cause of the migration. For example, the cyclone hit or any worst tragedy happened because of this thing, then the population migrate to the other areas. Okay, this can be, then government policy can become the cause. For example, in case of the big dam construction, when big dams are made, then the population which is submerged by the waters of these dams, they migrate to the other areas, and because of the government policies they migrate, right? So there are number of causes which generate the push factor plus pull factors, and these together, push factor and the pull factor, they contribute to the migration of population. So this is a general discussion of the migration, that what leads to the migration of the population. But in case of what we are more concerned here, we are discussing the Indian geography. So in case of India, what are the basic streams of the population? Okay, for example, in case of India, when you see there are number of streams present. Rural to first stream that we see is the rural to urban migration, right? And the second stream that we see is the sorry, first is, let us do the rural to rural migration. First is rural to rural migration, second is rural to urban migration, third is urban to urban migration, and fourth is urban to rural migration. So these are the four main streams which exist in India, right? And on the basis of these four streams, we will discuss the different factors, whether it is the push factor, what are the push factor operating, what are the pull factors that are operating. So first of all, let us discuss the rural to rural migration. See, rural to rural migration, this is a short distance migration. Short distance migration, where, okay, where most of the time short distance migration is happening because of women. Okay, women getting married and they migrate to the adjoining rural area. Okay, so because of the social factors, this short distance migration happen from rural to rural areas. But this rural to rural migration happens in the long distance also. Long distances also. And the long distance migration happens not because of social causes. The long distance migration always happens because of the economic causes. Okay, for example, from the Bihar UP Reach belt to the Punjab Haryana Green Revolution belt during the sowing season, this kind of the migration happens, right? So what we can say that this long distance migration is a selective migration. Okay, moving on to the second stream, that is the rural to urban migration. When you see the rural to urban migration, rural to urban migration is basically divided in the two time period. So we are making here a distinction of 1991. Before 1991, this rural to urban migration was intrastate, and after 1991, this rural to urban migration has become interstate in between the different states. Now, why this change happened? This change happened simply because of the government policies. Simply because of government policies. Now, how the government policies led to this change? See, before 1991, what India was following? India was following a socialistic model of economic growth, and in that we what we constructed the local growth poles. For example, Bhilai and many other growth poles were constructed or made in the eastern states, and because of these growth poles there were the avenues of the local employment, right? There were the opportunities of the local employment. So the population usually tend to migrate toward these centers of the employment, whether it is Bhilai, Ranchi, Raipur, etc. Okay, so population used to migrate intrastate. But what happened after 1991? The role of private sector increased. And private sector is motivated by the profit, not by the socialistic motives. So this led to the concentration of the employment in more developed region. Number one. Number two, in the regions which are more urbanized regions. Okay, so this led to creation of just few agglomerated centers. Okay, this created few agglomerated centers or agglomeration centers, right? And this basically few agglomeration center created the disparity between state. For example, one side the southern states and another side the northern states. Okay, the southern states, they become more, or they took more benefit of the LPG reform as compared to the northern state. So they were more benefited by the LPG reforms of 1991. So as a result, the economic opportunities were more in the southern states. So the what we can say that the general pattern of the migration was from north to south. Okay, so earlier distinction of the intrastate, okay, that changed into the interstate migration. Okay, now there was an article in newspaper. If on that basis, if we generally more quantify this intrastate, the three southern states, that is Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Maharashtra, they are three times more developed than the three states of UP, Jharkhand and Bihar. So this kind of distinction or this kind of disparity led to the interstate migration, and it is not that this migration is just happening from this state to only toward the southern state, also from this state to the national capital NCR region, Punjab Haryana belt as well. So this intrastate migration was the second type, right? So the first was the rural to rural migration, which was again two types: short term as the long short distance and the long distance. Short distance fused by the social factor, long distance fused by the economic factors. Then the rural to urban migration, there was a there was a distinction before 1991 and after 91, and that we studied here. Now the next migration is the urban to urban migration. Urban to urban migration. See, in urban to urban migration, what happened in case of India? India is witnessing heavy metropolization, right? For example, the 42% of Indian 42% of the total migrant, they are migrating to 52 metropolitan cities. Metropolitan cities. So the large metropolitan cities, which are million plus cities, they are witnessing the heavy metropolization. That means if you see the step migration, the small urban centers, they are being bypassed, and the population is directly migrating to the large urban cities, large centers, right? So this is leading to the heavy metropolization in this large city, and these streams from the small urban centers are basically constituted by the young migrants. They are young migrants. Now in the profile of young migrants, either they are going for the education there or for economic benefits. So this is the third type of the stream, that is urban to urban migration. The fourth stream basically is the very weak stream, that is the urban to rural this stream, urban to rural migration. This stream is basically called as the counter urbanization. Okay, now counter urbanization generally happens in developed world, where the population starts migrating to the adjoining areas of the urban areas, because in the urban areas, because of congestion, either the land rent have increased or they have become unstable because of the traffic congestion or the pollution factors. So counter urbanization is basically the phenomena of fourth stage of demographic transition. Okay, however, it is not just that it is the developed world which witness this counter urbanization. For example, in case of India, for example, this is the Delhi. Okay, and this is the national highway 44, NH44, and this is the highway which goes through the Gurgaon, and this is the Gurgaon, right? Many companies are migrating toward these national highways, leading to counter urbanization out of this Delhi. And the reasons are very same as they are in developed world, whether it is the land rent or it is the pollution, government regulation, the cheap land rate, etc. So these are the regions which lead to the counter urbanization. However, this stream is also distributed. For example, in case of uh, the 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 old population or the retired, say, personnel, the retired personnel, but this is very weak, the retired personnel migrating back to their hometown in the villages. So this is very weak, but major is this counter urbanization in the adjoining areas. So this is the fourth stream, that is the urban to rural areas. Okay. Okay, the next topic that we will do is the literacy gap. The next topic is the literacy gap. First of all, the literacy gap that we are studying here, the gap between the literacy of male and female. In 2001, the male female literacy gap was 21%. In 2011, although it reduced to 16%, but there is again wide scale disparity when we study the intrastate variables. Okay. For example, in Bihar and Haryana, it again increases to more than 20%, and when we study the Kerala, it reduces to be a mere 2 or 3%. So literacy gap again varies from state to state, but there are many reasons for this literacy gap that exist in India. And the reasons are, for example, the patriarchal mindset. Okay. And parents generally see the investment in the girls' education as a burden, which will the benefit of which will go somewhere else. This is the mindset. So this is the attitudinal problem. This is attitudinal problem in Indian population. The next, not just here in India, this exists everywhere. The gap exists everywhere. It is just the difference, or the how big the gap is, that varies basically. Community community tries to impose its will on the women as if they are just commodity, and they are just to follow here your whips. So this kind of attitude leads again to the less education in the girl children. The cost of education, again, this is very high. And when the cost of education very high, parents are less inclined to invest in the education of the girl child. Okay. And there are many other reasons. For example, the ideology. Many religions, even today, they are just guided by the ancient injunctions, and they force their injunctions upon the women. You wear this, you wear that, you sit with that, don't sit with that. So these kind of attitude again leads to secondarization of women, and these all the problems are just leading to this kind of the problem, that is the literacy gap. Okay, on this basis, the problems that we are facing, whether it is the high maternal mortality rate, high IMMR, they are all because of this less investment in the girls education. If the investment in the girl education is high, then obviously their consciousness will increase, and by educating a girl, you are educating the seventh generation. This is the line here basically. You increase the mobility. By educating girl, you increase the mobility of entire family, and this increase the main reason for the prosperity of those family which invest in the education of the girl child. Okay, the social well-being of entire society will increase, the attitude of entire society will increase, there will be the increase in the economic growth. As per the IMF, if you invest in the education of the girl, there will be double digit economic growth for many decades. There will be definitely the main teething problems, that the fertility is very high, this remains a teething problem in India. But if you invest in the education of the girl child, this problem will also go. So the panacea of all the problems is no solution for all the problems. The single solution is that you educate the girl child, and you are ending the many problems, the many vices which are currently occupying the society. Okay, on that we are now moving this, that on the basis of the literacy gap, this literacy gap varies among the religion also. So when you see in the religions, this literacy gap varies in the religions also. For example, in Jainas, literacy gap is minimum, and the maximum literacy is there in the Jainas, because they were the first one who were urbanized class. Okay, they settled in the urban areas close to ports. Okay, they invested in the education of their children, okay, because they were benefited by the economic growth. And then if you see in case of Christians, second in on the second rank, the literacy is high in the Christians. They were benefited because of the missionary activities. Okay, and if on the third side, if you see the growth, the education basically, sorry, the literacy is high in the Sikhism. Why literacy is high in Sikhism? They were again affected by the social reform movements, and these social reform movements promoted the education, whether it is the Singh Sabha movement, or it is the, so basically it was the Singh Sabha movement that promoted the education here in the Sikhism. And when you see the two communities, that is in Hindus and in the Muslims, in the last stage in the Muslims, the Muslim is the only religious group in India which has the literacy rate which is less than Hindus. Now, in case of Muslim, the reasons for the less literacy rate are many. The first reason is that they are suffering from the what we call as the identity crisis. Identity crisis. Number one, since independence, after the separation between India and Pakistan, the large population that of the Muslim that is suffering from identity crisis. The next problem is the ghettoization. Ghettoization. Because of this identity crisis, what happened? The population of the Muslim that concentrated in the small areas, and because of that concentration, the government never invested. Government never invested that high amount as it invested in the majority community education, in the minority community education. Okay, so they were no, how much and whatever we say, they were discriminated for no past 70-75 years. So that was again the big problem for that. And the next problem that was there in the education of the Muslims was their self-made, whether it is the religious injunctions, religious injunction, they became main problems for the Muslim education or increasing the Muslim education. The next problem that became for less education or the less literacy rate in the Muslim was the small size of the middle class. Small size of middle class. The middle class is always the aspirational class, middle class. But because of the small size of the middle class, the aspiration community was very small in Muslims. So this again led to the less establishment or the less establishment of schools and colleges. So schools and colleges as compared to the majority community are less for Muslims. Okay, particularly when you see, for example, AMU and BHU, they were established pre-independence, in the pre-independence period. Okay, and then again the big problem of India for every community, this patriarchal attitude that males are everything and they will only take the decision, women cannot take the decision, they are the secondary citizens. So this kind of attitude in the male society is extremely dangerous, vicious and harmful, not just for them but for the entire country, entire society and entire globe. So this kind of attitude again was present in the Muslim community, led to again the less literacy rate in the Muslims. So these were the main problems with the literacy of the different religious groups, and the literacy gap, the urbanization streams, and the first topic that we did was the dependency. Okay, now basically we have done the most topic of the population of India except one theory, that is the population theories, not population theory, sorry, population policy of India. Population policy of India. So population policy of India we will discuss separately because it's a very big topic. So this is the last or the end of this class. We will start with the population policy in next class probably. Okay, there is a request to please subscribe the channel. Please subscribe the channel. So thank you.